So I wanted to talk about this yesterday when I spoke about the immigration and the apartheid system and connect it to Namibia. Now, when South Africa colonized Namibia right after Germany, they divided the country into regions, right? As they divided the country into regions, they deployed, the Bantustan system. This meant that each region was assigned a form of mini government that reports back to the main government. So Namibia was treated like a province. But here's the thing: as the liberation struggle was going on, and mostly why the liberation struggle's narrative is about the Awambo people is because, right, because of the difference in governing. With the Awambo people, there was the armed struggle resistance, which was more aggressive than it was in other regions. And the ideologies were also different. For example, if you were, no, let me just give you this example. Some of the Kavango people, right, whether this was South African propaganda or whether it was true, were told that if SWAPO were to win, they would make the, I don't know if it was Ndonga or Kwanyama, the national language, and basically make Namibia a an Owambo dominated country, right? Which in retrospect would be sort of what the South Africans were doing. It was almost like a takeover from what they're doing. So other people in other regions decided to defend their right to their own ethnicity. This is why how some people were manipulated into joining SWATEF, and particularly in the Kavango region, the SWATEF wasn't aggressor. They weren't aggressive. They were more like guardians, so to speak, rather than real troop soldiers. The Kufut, however, were, as most people know them, more aggressive. I know this for a fact. My family suffered at the hands of Kufut, who happened to be Owambo speaking. And my grandfather harbored a lot of SWAPO men. They even had a name for him. I don't recall, he told me, because he would usually invite them in, they would eat, and they would drink and rest, and ask him for advice and tell him why they are fighting. That's why I have an uncle who joined the armed struggle, and at the same time this was mostly to fend off the Kufut, because they would come destroy your crops and destroy your homestead. They'll just bust in with the Caspers and so forth. But this was in a segment of the region. In other segments, they didn't use a full-on aggressive force. Rather, they used propaganda, like I told you, like this is what they want to do, prevent this and so forth. And it was very difficult for younger men to discern whether this was true or not. But obviously they also wanted to protect themselves from this supposed threat on both sides, right? People say some people chose the wrong side of history. Well, most of the people who killed SWAPO members and Namibians, they were mostly South African or Kufut. SWATEF, not really. They were going to be this sort of when you set up a government, you want to have a presence. It's like having a base of your nationality there, just to show presence, right? If there is need for aggression, then you send it from the other side. And they were more for intel, what other people saying and so forth. Some people did it because they wanted to change their life conditions, to, you know, because they were paid, obviously. And some people, in fact, were encouraged by chiefs who didn't see the benefit of one group in Namibia, one ethnic group, dominating the rest of the other groups, right? So there was politics and guerrilla warfare, and this should be separated, because the politics is usually shoved under the rug. For example, how many people know that South Africa actually helped with the transition of Namibia from a colony to a former colony? And this was due to the change of politics within South Africa, of course. And it was also helped by the armed struggle. You know, people were losing sons, and they didn't want that anymore. You know, they were like, why are we sending, you know, our kids to die? And it was mandatory, and that just made people start to rebel against that system. So yes, some people could have supposedly resisted and not joined, but the form of indoctrination and the form of intimidation of their own families' well-beings was also something that you need to look at. It became a political dictatorship, right? So I wasn't saying that the past wrongs should be forgotten, and you know, we should all hug, and you know, they just happen to land here and so forth. No, what I was trying to say is the middle ground is not always as popular with people from both sides as most people would think. So yes, they the descendants of immigrants, the um, descendants of the former colonizers, and the lack of real portrayal of history, the propaganda, the indoctrination, the politics that went on, this is all part of what most people um, don't know, and thus they they can't reconcile because of that gap, because of that lack of information, right? The CIA was in Namibia, and who were they working with, right? So as much as the armed conflict affected people, the politics behind it is just as guilty, or even more so, than the people who perpetrated these crimes on whose orders. And people died on both sides of the aisle. I lost a family member. My uncle was in the armed struggle. Family member died from what? Accusations of being a spy for South Africa, and so forth. So these situations would of course lead some to seek protection. So there is no glorious armed rebellion victory. There never was. This all had to do with politics and the economy. Like I said, South Africa had the most powerful army in Africa. If they wanted to, they would have and could have sent more troops, more firepower, but what they wanted was territory. This was territorial dispute, and it was territorial dispute, South Africa trying to get territory, as well as Namibians trying to protect their territories, but they were protecting them from all um, sides of the aisle, right? So loyalism won't really work. And of course it's understandable. I mean, I get it. People get um, angry, and emotional about this topic and these topics, but they lead to a particular answer, and I'm going to try and illustrate that later on in the day.